Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TouchNot channel. Thanks for joining us. With me today is a friend I've known for many years at the Highland Games in New England at the Clan MacIntyre tent. His name is Wright, and he's one of the first people I thought of when I knew I had to get some information about Clan MacIntyre for our McIntyre month of November on the TouchNot channel and the Clanhattan Association channels. Welcome, Cass. Thanks so much for being here with us.
That's my pleasure, Ray.
Um, I know that some McIntyres, like a few other Hatton clans, are not all affiliated with our confederation. And there's the organization you're affiliated with are the ones that are not. But it's very relevant to us at any rate. I'd like to learn all we can about McIntyre.
Well, thank you. And speaking to that topic of those that might see themselves as being included here, included there, then I can speak on behalf of, I think, Clan MacIntyre right around the world. We consider all of our folks to be included and to be welcome and to be at home in any of our gatherings, anywhere around the globe, at any tent. If you like, I guess I can give you a quick general overview of my clan.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
Sure, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Yes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read it right from one of our history sheets. These are the sheets that we keep at the clan tent. And whenever we're visited by anyone who has a background with any of the names on our name board, and they can actually address a relationship to our clan, I like to give them this history sheet. Everyone knows a little bit about our clan. I find that a lot of visitors don't really have an adequate overview. That's why we use the history sheets. So just to share with you the beginning of this, I'll read directly from here. In 1140, the only man standing between renowned warlord Somerled and domination of the Western Isles was his rival, Olaf the Red, Norse King of Man. Strategically, Somerled sought to wed the king's daughter, Ragnhilda. Olaf, however, insisted on denying him her troth. Enter Murdo MacNeil, a landless Ulster prince turned shipwright who was both Olaf's foster brother and Somerled's nephew. MacNeil convinced his uncle that he knew a way to win him his bride, as he had Olaf's fraternal trust, and with Somerled's blessing, he put his plan into motion. Under cover of night, Murdo sabotaged Olaf's galleys, where they lay beached among the isles, by boring holes just above its waterline, then filling them with tallow, beeswax, and sawdust. The next day, workman's satchel in hand, he joined Olaf's crew. After casting off, they met heavy seas. The tallow mortar washed away, and the vessel began taking water. At which point, Murdo vowed to save all aboard if Olaf would pledge Ragnhilda's hand to Somerled. The pact was hastily sworn, and while Olaf's men bailed furiously, Murdo hammered wooden plugs into the leaks, stopping the inflow of water and rescuing the crew. At the wedding that followed, Somerled proclaimed that henceforth all descendants of his nephew would be known as the sons of the Wright, in Gaelic, McIntyre, and would be awarded lands in the region of Slate on the Isle of Skye, there to bear arms, gather kin and followers, and establish the chiefly line of the new clan. So that's a pretty decent little overview. It tells you that ultimately our original progenitor went by the name of MacNeil, being the youngest son of the King of Ulster. As I indicated there in brief, when he returned home from being a hostage on the Isle of Man, his father basically said, your brothers have taken up all the wealth. You need to make your own way in the world. And casting about, he saw the simplest part to take up was that of being a shipwright. The benefit there being that they were in high demand. They were like a blacksmith or a bard.
Mhm.
He could make his way wherever he went, and that led him into that situation with his uncles, who of course was the renowned warlord Summerlin. So that's the overview. About a century and a half after those happenings, um, we got to quarreling too long with our Viking in-laws up on Skye, and we
Okay.
were driven out, and we wandered by boat and by foot until we came to the little inland valley of Glennoe, and that is where our chiefly line descends on. There is a little bit of a corkscrew mystery through between back then and now, in that a lot of our history became lost, became obscured, became overwritten. Allegedly, there was something called the Black Book of Glennoe, which archived our entire history in great detail. What happened to that and where that went, no one can seem to figure out. That would answer a lot of questions. Like, for instance, why, if we've been around since the 1100s, our current chief is numbered 10. I'll refer to him as Donald S. And speaking for a moment on our chief, we do have a chief recognized by the Standing Council.
Oh.
He is Donald Russell McIntyre. He lives in upstate New York. He makes his way by being a professional welder.
Uh-huh.
I'm told he's got a few years on me, which is hard to imagine he's still doing that profession that long, but that is evidently the case. I am told he is a wise and warm and wonderful man, but he is almost fixationally a hermit. He does not travel. He
Mhm.
does not attend any functions. He goes about his life and he's satisfied with that. He is aware of his inherited title and his obligations, but basically, he has assigned us a lieutenant, that being our good friend Patty McIntyre Hayes.
Okay.
And he relies on her and our own counselors in the Clan MacIntyre Association. We do have a chieftain. We have one cadet house left. Most of us believe there was originally 4 or 5. There's only one left that we know of, and that is the cadet house of Camusneri. That's up on Loch Leven, up in the country of my family line.
Okay.
He is the chieftain. He is currently the 18th chieftain. I served his father as Genadar. That's a Gaelic post equivalent to bodyguard, right-hand man, spokesperson.
Okay.
I served his father in that capacity, and by specific appointment, I now serve his father, his son rather, Duncan, who is the 18th commissary. This, I should show you this. This is the book authored by our beloved clan historian, Martin McIntyre. It was his father, LD, back in the 40s and 50s, who sort of awakened our clan from slumber. Actually collected all the history together, put out a little 60-page booklet, actually traveled to Scotland from New York State, found the ancestral land, sort of like shook us all awake and brought us to the 20th century.
Wonderful.
And having been with him on those exercises, Martin took it upon himself to become the clan historian and to take, oh gosh, 30 plus years to put together this book, which can be ordered directly from him if anyone's interested. But I cracked it out today to see what he had to say about the McIntyres we refer to as the McIntyres of Badenoch,
Okay,
which would be uh, our little slice that joined your confederacy
correct.
back in the day. Um, I can quote you an overview of what is said here about them, or I can field questions or inquiries. Um, Show is yours, Ray. Take it away.
Yep, sure. So my understanding is that in 1496, like if you as you speak of a chieftain, I believe it was one of the McIntosh chieftains. He's billed in one of the couple of writings as a future chief. So he was eventually, but not at that moment, I guess. He traveled, I think, over toward the Appin area there
Mhm.
on a few one or two military engagements, or perhaps that type of a situation. And the story is that this bard, a McIntyre bard, came into his camp, quote unquote, and then I guess I could simplify it as saying he traveled back home with them, or eventually
Mhm.
did. It may not have been that day, but it could because he took his family apparently with him, and he eventually fathered, you might say, a line of McIntyres further
Mhm.
east in the what would be considered the interior, along with becoming that group of McIntyres became a member of the Clan Confederation, perhaps
Mhm.
chiefless, or I'm pretty sure there's no dual chiefship going on here or anything like that. It was simply an offshoot of McIntyres, I think, left for
Mhm.
Hatton, you might
Mhm.
say. That's how I understand it, Cass.
Yeah. In fact, along that line, I will share with you the first paragraph in this chapter, the Badenoch McIntyres, if I may.
Sure, thanks.
Um, the clan Cotton McIntyres in Badenoch, an offshoot of the main body of the clan in Glenoe, occupied the lands of Upper Strathspey in the Central Highlands from the late 15th century, settling mainly in the parishes of Kingussie and Logan, and also further down the River Spey in the vicinity of Alvey. Collectively dominating the highlands between the Grampians and the Moray Firth, Clan Cotton itself was a confederation of allied clans forming a major power block within the region. The heartland of the Badenoch McIntyres lay in the neighboring glens of the Troom between Newton Moor and Dromoctor, and
Oh,
the Tromy, which joins the Spey at Kingussie, and there is some evidence to suggest that Glen Tromy was the clan's original foothold in Badenoch. The McIntyres lived among their clan Cotton brethren, the McPhersons, a well-integrated community that survived until the mid 19th century, though it was the Laird of McIntosh whose seat at Donocton lay close to the mouth of the Tromy, who first introduced the name to the district.
ah,
So I think that dovetails very closely with what you're saying. Um, Interesting that I find the place name of Kingussie. The McIntyres have 7 surviving Tartans, and of course they all have place name designations. And the only one that is built from just blue and green is called sometimes is called the McGregor McIntyre um, tartan, which I find deceptive. I don't like the intrusion of another clan's name on one of our tartans.
well,
It's
there is a connection. I've read it about it, I think a little, right? Is there not?
right. So I prefer to refer to that tartan as the Kingussie tartan.
Okay.
That's how a lot of McIntyres know that. If I was wearing a short sleeve shirt, I could show you I have a tattoo of the shape of the state of Vermont with that tartan in it. And I didn't specifically choose that tartan at the time. My late daughter was still with us, and I asked her what she thought I should do. And she said, "That's a lot of work, Papa." She said, "I'd go with the simple one." And that is the simplest tartan we have. It's just blue and green, warp and weft. And that's referred to as a Kingussie tartan.
Hmm. Now there is a McGregor connection of some sort or other in the past, is there not?
There is as many several times the McIntyres were pivotal in in specifically hiding out Rob Roy when he
Ah,
was on the lam. I think a lot of people did that for him, but they hid him out and sequestered him a number of times when he was being pursued. And he was very generous in returning that favor. A couple of times he interceded on more remote McIntyre crofts when they were being how to say this, when they were being unduly red coated.
hmm.
He succeeded several times with his forces to give them some relief. Um, so yes, and I think the McGregors in general were a recognized neighbor. Um, our main body in Glencoe, our closest neighbor there were the Stuarts of Appin.
Yes.
When we served in Prince Charlie's army, we lost our commander, who at the time was the heir of a different cadet house. I was trying to think what it was called, and the name escapes me at the moment. It's no longer Cadet House, but he was the heir at the time, and he was the commander. Uh, we lost him at I believe the Battle of Falkirk. So the troops were leaderless, and they were absorbed into the Appin Regiment, and that is who we stood with on that fateful day on the moor.
Right. I'm not sure, Cass, if it's the same Stewart or not. There's several Stewarts here and there all through, right? Um, Colonel John Roy Stewart formed a regiment in Edinburgh. So a couple, a semi-famous, I should say, McIntyre. I wouldn't be knowing his name if he wasn't famous. Let's say, they call him James of the Flag. He was one of the Badenoch McIntyres.
Yes.
Um, he joined Colonel John Roy Stewart. I'm not sure if that's of Appin, a different name to say that regiment, or is it a separate regiment? It may be, but he went with that, and he was known as a banner bearer for that, of the
Yes.
Ducardine Green Banner, they call it.
Yeah. There was also another McIntyre, I believe, related to the one you're quoting, who was appointed as the governor of Edinburgh Castle by Prince Charlie
Ah,
when he left the city, and he was the one who tried to hold the castle against the the redcoats uh, when they made it to Edinburgh after Culloden. And of course, that was nearly suicidal, and eventually he had to surrender the castle. But he was noted for for standing tall in the face of impossible odds. That was the Cumberland's force that swept into Edinburgh, and he could not hold the castle against them.
right.
But he was a McIntyre as well, and I believe he was related to James O'Labanner, as we
Oh,
refer to in the clan.
yes, yep. And
He is a similar figure to the young Livingston who survived Culloden and brought the Appin banner back home concealed under his great kilt. And there's a painting of him with his commander's widow, and in this little like like White House, you can see a little bit of sunlight coming in, and he's opening his kilt and showing her the flag inside which is a yellow saltire against the
yes,
blue. So yeah, we were all, I always tell people who visit the tent, particularly new visitors who are of the blood, I tell them, we were never a large clan, but we were historically a critical clan. We have our own ways of turning up at a lot of critical points in history.
I'm learning that, Cass, as I am about many of the Hatton clans. It's incredible to say, but yes, they all have their moments and parts and stories to tell, moments to be proud of.
So I think between what you shared with me and what I've quoted here from the book, um, uh, not to pun too horribly, but we're on the same page.
Right.
Uh, all of this dovetails and makes perfect sense. Um, the bard who came, as they say, came up the bray, um, basically needing protection to your people. Um, I find them people of that ilk through history often referred to as broken men. Um, I don't think that was a military situation for him. I think he was just trying to survive with his community, and their forces were broken down and they were on the move.
Yeah.
Uh, this happens, I think, with a lot of Highland clans. For our people, it only really happened once. You know, it's curious. I have 52 names on that name board of names that go into the clan. But of all those names are basically um, craft names, um, respellings,
Right.
misspellings, um, and of course, for instance, I'm a I'm a Wright only because of the Jacobite Rebellion. My 6 times great grandfather was involved in smuggling arms to Charlie, and when he heard about Callaud, and he wasn't present when he heard about that, he basically ran for his life. He was sure they were going to find out. He got his family with the help of the Catholic Church. He got them first to Ireland and then to Wales. And what they did, as many McIntyres did, they translated their name to Wright because it means the same thing in English, son
Uh-huh.
of carpenter. And uh, and I would estimate that a good half of the Scottish Wrights in North America used to be McIntyres, and their names got translated because of the well, not just the one, but the multiple Jacobite rebellions.
Yeah. One of my questions was whether your surname had been changed, and
Yeah,
and you
that's
get
it.
and you beat me to it. I'm also I find it interesting that you've used the word dovetail a few times, like a good woodworker might. That's a wood joint, my friends, that puts wood together very nicely and tightly. If you didn't know, it's a common thing in woodworking.
Mhm. Sure, sure. But I'm sorry, I got myself off track. Where I was going about the name board and about broken man and taking people in, as obviously um, your folks did for our chapter of those people. The only time that happened to the McIntyres was when the McCoshams came up the Glen, and they were a small group. Even basically, they sued for protection, and and the story goes that my people were very kindly disposed to them, but while they were making their decision, one of them happened to mention that they were all trained gunsmiths. And once the McIntyres heard that, that made up their mind in a hurry, as there was obviously a great value to having that skill in the clan.
Right.
So that's where we got the McCoshams, and now I still meet them as McCoshams, Coshams, McCoyshams, variations of that. But that's the only sept that we ever took in from the outer world, where it was the McCoshams.
Now we had a little about we were back at Culloden there for let's go back there for a moment if we can. Um, so a lot of the McIntyres in Badenoch apparently lived over the fence or within the fence with McPhersons there. That was their
Mhm.
uh, identical neighborhood to them, very closely aligned there. And a lot of them, rather than, I think very few went with that Colonel John Roy Stewart's regiment to Edinburgh. Not that there were a lot of them to begin with, but most went with Clooney's regiment, McPherson of Clooney's regiment.
Right, right.
In the
Who gave
45, they joined that group rather than this other that James of the Banner did. They may not have been as far as I should say. No, known or not, after that, it's the McPherson regiment doing this and that. But like you say, they've been there right along, as many clans have been blended in, and doesn't mean they're not there, folks.
Yeah, I think and of course you all, Clooney is such a huge figure. Everybody hears anecdotes about him. The favorite one I had was after Culloden, when he was helping our prince escape. At one point, they occupied a cave together, and Charlie, being a little chilly, asked if he might use Clooney's blanket, and and the line that followed was, in such reply, uh, Clooney gave him a dusty answer, which I interpret to mean, well, he said as politely as possible, no.
Right.
Yeah. Um, yeah, um, of course, Culloden is like the fixing point, I think, for a lot of us Highland descendants. You know, it's sort of like Pearl Harbor or the JFK assassination.
Sure.
Historically, all the clans seem to know what they were about when that was happening.
Yep.
In our case, by that time, our main branch in Glencoe um, were tenants of the Earl of Breadalbane, Campbell,
All right.
and had been for a generation. I think it's fair to say they were learning to deal with that through gritted teeth. And um, when the last rebellion picked up speed, of course, the Campbells were firmly on the government side and running it all for them. Um, the Earl came up the Glen and basically told our chief at the time, "Get your young men together. I'm going to march them down. They're going to join my regiment and fight for the government."
Mm.
And of course, that was not what was in their hearts. So the chief wrangled with him for a little bit about that, as much as he dared, and then he finally said, "Allow me to do this. I need to keep my young men here. Allow me to take a pledge of neutrality." And the Earl agreed to that, and he took the pledge. And then, according to our history, while the pledge was going on, half of our young men were running down the backside of the Glen to follow the drums and join up with Charlie.
Were they?
And,
Hmm.
and I guess that was, it ended up being like three-quarters of our young men drifted off and caught up with Charlie. And there was quite a few. Well, eventually they formed their own regiment, as I had mentioned, under John McIntyre. Um, but evidently, in the wake of Culloden, when they started, flipping the bodies over, uh, several of the Campbell commanders recognized the White Heather and the Tartan, and the word got back to the Earl pretty quickly that there was
Mm.
a considerable number of McIntyres slain on the battlefield, and also marched down to Carlisle to be hanged.
Oh,
And that word got back, and I guess the Campbell was furious, and he said, and he put all he hammered them with prescription even before the axe came out. And he also told them, "No more of this fatted calf and snowball business. You're going to pay your rent in cash." And that was the beginning of that downhill slide. That went on for another 50 some odd years before eventually the rising rent and our depleting resources just drove us out. Uh, the current chief left for America, I think, in 1806, and left his brother to manage the estates, but that didn't last long. And eventually, we were gone from the Glen, and it was just another Campbell holding. So
oh.
that's where it all ended up for us.
I must say, Cass, you have a certain way of saying all this and talking. I'm really picturing two guys on one side of the hill shaking hands while this 18 or so men between the
Yeah.
ages of 18 and 30 on the other side of the hill, getting their coats on. You have a way of saying that. It's really nice. I appreciate this very much.
Well, yeah, you know, like I do, what it takes to keep a good clan tent humming and hold the attention of people who are interested off, but often easily distracted. And you want to keep their interest. And usually, if I can nail their attention for just 3 or 4 minutes, I can watch. I can see the spark in the eyes,
Right.
and then I know that I've done the assets as well. The hook is in. I can fill in some details, and they're off on their own.
Yeah, these little vignettes or one act plays, you might say, or something you can say to someone in half a minute or less. Uh, they're true gems, are they not, Cass?
They are. It was good. I don't have him anymore. He's a very busy man in other regards, but it was great those years that I had Jonathan for a day or two in the
Hmm.
tent, because we could play off each other very, very nicely. I remember one day we were standing out in the midway in front of the tent, 10 or 12 feet in front of the table there. And this older woman came by and she was leaning pretty heavily on her cane. And she paused for a moment to catch her breath. And she had to look up the two of us standing together. And she laughed out loud. And she reached out with her cane. She gave me a little tap on the leg. And she's, well, I can tell you two are cousins. And Jonathan said, oh, you can. And she's, oh, certainly. And she says, yep. She clucked her tongue. She's cousins. She says, and not a little bit of Norse blood, she says, I'd reckon.
Huh.
So, and well, the blessings of that advanced age. I think she was had a little second sight going, because, of course, like many of us, the McIntyres are Hebridean. We're, to begin with, we're as much Viking as we were Irish,
Yes,
uh, and that shows, I guess.
indeed. All that. So I've read a little bit about Lorne, right? We only have about maybe 5 minutes left, but
Right?
I'm pronouncing it Kenna Lorne was part of that Dalriada,
Yeah.
which when you said earlier, you're talking about the O'Neills, sometimes that's written with a UI, O'Neill
Yeah.
or O'Neill. That's what was known as a kennel in Ireland, a very powerful kennel. And if this man MacNeil came from that, um,
Mhm.
probably through Dalriada or by way of, or by
Sure.
sanction of course, I would think, depending what time this was. Um, it's all interplayed. I'm always coming back to the Del Riata story with a lot
It
of
is.
clans. You just can't help but do it, Cass. You just can't.
Yep. And it makes me almost bristle a little bit when I hear people falsely collapsing our history. They make remarks like, well, from the time that McAlpin defeated and extinguished the Picts, I go, whoa, wait a minute. Those those were his grandparents. Those were his cousins and his in-laws.
Yep.
He had enough to do fighting everybody else in the world. I get a feeling he kept pretty good relations with the Picts. And again, armchair historians, you hear them say, well, where do the Picts go? I say, what do you mean, where do they go? They're right here.
Hmm.
That is a large percentage of our bloodline, especially if you're most Hebrideans credited as being about half Gaelic, quarter Norse, quarter Pict. Uh,
Right.
was sort of the flavor of the day, and I think that's what made us, according to historians, such ferocious Highlanders. Was that we had that background, and we were used to fighting the world.
Right. I'm sure the first Scotty that put their toes on the sand over there had to do it a little bit precariously and shake some hands at first, unless they brought an awful lot of people with them. So I'm
Exactly.
sure there was a long period of getting to know one another before there was any of these kennels going on or any of that. We're talking about 503 when some of this was founded, but I'm sure into the late fours and mid fours there was a lot of course, trade before that went on too. But
Well,
Yeah,
Jonathan always liked to point out from the point of Antrim down to the point of Kintyre, that's only 14 miles by boat.
mm,
On a good
amazing.
weather
Yes,
day, that's 2 trips a day. Ray, I want to thank you very much for the reaching out. We've always had good community between you and I and between our tents.
we have.
I would say if you have anyone, uh, I should say, the next time you have anyone landing at your tent, uh, pursuing the unique history of the Badenoch McIntyres as members of your confederacy. All I would ask of you, just inquire if they've been over to my tent.
Sure.
If they haven't yet, send them over. Let me just, cover the basics. I'll send them right back to you, and we will work on the ties that bind.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on today.
My
Certainly
pleasure.
learned an awful lot about McIntyres that I really didn't have any idea of.
I think it's all to the good. It's making the McIntyre, it's making the ancestors smile on both our sides. And I would say to you, winter well, my friend.
Alrighty. Take care. Take care till we see you again, Cass, and that won't be long.
Very good. Thank you, Ray.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Touch not. If you've been enjoying our month-by-month Clan Hatton history segments on the Touch Not channel, please subscribe. Thank you, my friends.